Ever wonder why some anglers out there could go out and catch loads of slab crappie while others struggle to even get a bite? Well, if you find yourself not catching your fair share of fish, it's because you're falling into a trap that's very overlooked among a lot of anglers out there. Good news is it's really easy to fix. So in this video, I'll show you the very easy fixes that you could use to find crappie anywhere. I'll show you the gear that you need, and I'll even show you some subtle techniques I teach all my clients that really catch them an absolute ton of fish. So the most common question I get from all my clients, as well as from a lot of people on YouTube, is simply, where do I find the fish, right? Where are they biting at? You know, that kind of thing. And it really doesn't have to be as mythical as most people will have you believe. So take a look at this example right here. This is me and my son fishing. Okay, we're gonna catch just a ton of crappie here and some really nice crappie as well. Now you'll notice a few things in my spot selection here. One is the wind is blowing right in my face. That's gonna be a key factor here. Also notice that big concrete slab I'm fishing off of. I'm not going right on top of it, but I'm fishing that concrete slab. That's gonna be your cover. Okay, there's gonna be concrete and some rocks around there, and crappie prefer hard cover. Next thing you'll notice is that is a water discharge, right? They build these concrete slabs and ponds and lakes so that water has someplace to go when it rains. And what that does is that cuts out a trench in the lake. So this is going to be deep water adjacent to shallow water, and that is your structure. Structure is very common with depth changes, points, choke points, different things like this. So if you hear me talk about cover and structure, that's what I'm talking about. Deep contour breaks is going to be structure. And of course, things like concrete slabs, rocks, lily pads, that type of stuff is going to be your cover. So like I said, this was our first spot and we're just catching tons of fish. What I always want to avoid is walking around an entire lake or getting in my boat and driving around a lake looking for fish half my day, because that's a colossal waste of time. And what I want to do is I want to get on my body of water, catch fish. If you're with your kids, you have to catch fish really quick or else they're going to lose interest and they're just going to drive you nuts. So that's exactly the plan. We executed the plan and we absolutely had a ball. Now, to do this for yourself, I fish with a system I call the fishing triangle system. You have to keep in mind the fish's comfort zone, their access to food, and their protection from predators. And if you can narrow those three things in there, you're already way ahead of most fishermen on the water out there. Now you add the fourth factor in, and that is water movement. That is the wind blowing directly at me. This does a number of things. One, those crappie are going to be in that area because they have easy access to shallow water and deep water. So that is their comfort right there. They have access to food because a lot of fish are going to be in this area. And then of course they have protection from predators because they have a lot of cover near them, like the concrete slab, rocks, and different things like that. And so that's exactly what's happening here. So I know I'm in the right area. That wind is blowing food, injured prey, and warm water towards those crappie. So I start fishing, we catch fish, and you could do this as well very simply using some pre-trip planning. And if you want to plan ahead and not waste tons of time just like walking around a lake or driving around the lake, I made a tool for you that's free that you could check out in the link below. It's called the Fishalot bot, and it's an app I developed that you could type in whatever you're fishing for and wherever you think you might be fishing, and it'll actually guide you through where you should start looking for a fish and even the tactics you could use to catch fish. Again, it's free. I'll link it down below. It's totally up to you, but it could really help you out, not waste your time, and find fish very, very quickly. The other advantage to pre-trip planning is if you find yourself out on the water and nature throws a curveball at you, well, now since you planned a little bit ahead, you can easily pivot to find those active feeding fish way quicker than anybody else out there on the water. So now that you could save tons of time finding your fish, I'm now going to save you tons of time with your lure and gear selections so you don't have 18 rods sitting on your deck and you're constantly picking up different lures, blaming the lures for not catching fish instead of where and how you're fishing. There are three basic reasons you're not catching fish with lures or bait that nobody talks about, but that you really have to pay attention to. And the first one is going to be your depth control. Now, this is going to be important to avoid all that influencer advice out there of best baits in April and all this kind of stuff. The important thing is to think about the lessons that we previously just discussed about the fish's comfort zone, where they want to be in the water. Do they want to be in that warmer water or cooler water? Do they want want to be next to that structure and that cover? And do they have easy access to food and protection from predators? That is going to be key in determining where in the water column you are going to fish for these fish. So you really want to determine, are the fish going to be shallow or are they going to be deep? Do I have a lure that can be fished in a versatile way that will allow me to put my lure in front of a fish no matter where they are in the water? So the second point here is going to be your profile of your baits. So for this, you really have to pay attention to what the fish are eating. Okay, are they eating large fish? Are they eating small fish? And you're going to have to match your presentations to that. A huge misconception out there is that big baits catch big fish, but that is not always true. A matter of fact, you'll be amazed at how large of a fish will eat small presentations of lures. You just have to figure out each day what they're honed in on, what the fish are eating at different times of year, and if you can match that with big or small lure or bait presentations. And your final thing, this is the big killer out there, and that's going to be your speed of your presentation. This is going to be the #1 killer for a lot of anglers out there, especially with all that advice out there about extra fast action rods and super high gear ratio reels. A lot of anglers out there are just fishing way too fast. And if you fish too fast, you're going to eliminate your depth control and you're going to take your bait out of that depth zone too quickly, and you're going to remove that bait from the fish before they have a chance to strike. So now that we discussed the importance of putting your lure in front of the fish with depth control, so controlling your speed or getting your lure in front of a fish long enough for them to eat is going to be the key area. So this spot right here, where you have this intersection of the correct speed, the correct profile of your baits, and your correct depth and depth control, this is going to be key to your fishing success right here. And those are the 3 reasons why a lot of people fail at catching fish with lures or bait. So now that we have this down, let's go ahead and take a look at some gear and some simplified lure presentations that can accomplish these 3 things to catch you most amount of fish. So now that we know exactly where we're looking for our crappie and we know the type of presentation we need to trigger bites, let's talk about the lure and presentation specifically. And what I love to use, especially this time of year, is something as simple as a peg float and a jig head with a soft piece of plastic. This is a Bobby Garland 164-ounce jig head with a crappie magnet at the end of this, and these things just catch a ton of fish. Now what you'll notice is a lot of people will thumb their nose up at a peg float or a bobber of any sort. They'll be like, ha ha ha, that's a beginner technique, or ha, I'm a professional and my farts don't stink. Yeah, you know, something crazy like that. But nothing can be further from the truth. What this is doing for you is allowing you to suspend fish. You're basically dangling this lure right in front of a fish's face and antagonizing it to bite. And this is going to be very successful in time periods, especially in the spring when nasty cold fronts blow through and those fish become inactive, or maybe it gets really hot. This works in the summer, the spring, the winter, anytime where you have inactive fish. Now, the other advantage to a peg float and suspend fishing is you vary your depth. Remember, that's one of the key aspects of the correct lure to select via the peg float. So all you do is, if you want to fish a little bit shallower, you take the peg float and you move it down towards the lure. If you think those fish are deeper, you take your peg float and you move it up your line away from the lure. It's just that simple, and it avoids swapping out your lures all the time, blaming your lures instead of where you're fishing, especially in the water column, right? The fish could be at the bottom, they could be suspended, they could be sunning themselves on top, and this peg float is just ideal to get that done. The other advantage to a peg float, now remember, you're suspend fishing, is you can put all sorts of different action on this thing. You could twitch, pause the peg float, and your lure under the float will just kind of skip and jump, and then once again settle right in front of those fish's face. Or you can do what I like to do when I'm jerkbait fishing for largemouth bass, is you can just really lightly move your hand just like this, and you're just kind of jigging it. You just have that little subtle quiver of the bait underneath the peg float, and fish will absolutely destroy that thing, especially if they're a little bit inactive. So this gives you the most variety for your crappie fishing. Now, what this does not do well is if you find yourself fishing at depth, like let's say you're in like Lake Ontario up north and those fish are still at 35 feet, well then you're going to want to go to something like this. And again, this isn't going to be too complicated. This is just another jig head with a piece of soft plastic on it. Now, what I really like is this Leland fin spin with a hole in it. So that's a little spinner. I just love fishing with these things in the spring. Again, it gives me a little bit of horizontal movement. I could jig it. I could do lots of different stuff with this. This is one of my favorite baits. Now, there's a ton of soft plastics you could throw on here. I think this is a baby fluke from Zoom. Bobby Garland makes great soft plastics. There's a ton of lures out there, okay? But this right here is really unique because it's got that hole inside of there from Leland. This is a fin spin jig head. This is 1/16 of an ounce, and combined with 2-pound test line right here, that 1/16 of an ounce could get you to depth so quickly because you don't have really any line diameter here. And I always recommend 2-pound test line. It triggers way more bites than anything else. You'll be amazed how large a fish you could catch with 2-pound mono because you need that stretch in there as well. And then of course you could get this thing to depth so much more easily. What I like to combine this with, you see that hole in the head right here in the jig head? I take these Crappie slab bites, okay, and I roll them up in my finger, and you actually stick it in the jig head itself, and that is going to give you its scent. And that scent stays in there very well, and it's just in the jig head right there, so it's not washing out as much as if it was in the body of the lure, like a lot of sprays will do. Now, your other alternative to a lot of scent, of course, is going to be something like this, good old Gulp. I love Gulp. They catch tons of fish everywhere, saltwater or freshwater. But the thing with Gulp is when you're fishing for a little while, you need to take your soft plastic and you need to recharge it often. So you have to get a container like this or some kind of liquid, and then you recharge it in the liquid. Also, Gulp lures tend to tear a lot, and they do get a little bit of expensive. So what I like to do is that this fin spin right here with the spinner blade on the bottom, and you put the scent in the jig head itself. You'll be amazed at how many big crappie you catch and how many big largemouth bass you catch doing this. You could catch some monsters while you're crappie fishing. And again, that's just the advantage of ultralight fishing with 2-pound test line and things like this, is really big fish will eat small lure presentations. And that's the best part about it. Just so much fun. Now, all these tips will catch you fish, but as I said earlier, finding your fish is really the key principle to any of this for your fishing success. So click on this video right here if you want a deep dive on how to use the tool specifically that's free to use, that can find you fish so much quicker than anything else out there. So go ahead and check that out, Fishalots. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you out there on the water.